A huge Tuesday in the world of sports. The college football playoff rankings will be unveiled for the first time in 2024, for the first time in the 12-team era of the college football playoff. How is the selection committee seeing everything that we have all viewed throughout this 2024 college football season? And we'll start by using the odds and what we can anticipate, perhaps expect tonight. So, Joe, let's go through the tiers as the odds present themselves. We'll make a couple of distinctive points here. I'll lay out what a bracket would look like currently at the end of 10 weeks after the opening weekend in November based on the playoff prices currently available on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Oregon is the number one team in the country and has the best price to reach the college football playoff on FanDuel at minus 4,000. Oregon also has the decisive tiebreaker advantage currently over Ohio State with the head-to-head victory, but Ohio State's huge win on Saturday in State College. The Buckeyes now the national championship favorites, second best price to reach the college football playoff at minus 3,500. Georgia has the best number to win the SEC, second best price to win the national title, minus 2,000, and they did beat Florida in a rivalry game by 2 touchdowns, but did not cover, and Carson Beck just keeps throwing interceptions. 10 touchdown passes to 11 INTs in 6 SEC games for the Dogs this year. But they have that direct tiebreaker in front of Texas, minus 1,250 for the Horns. Miami remains one of the 5 undefeated teams in the country at the FBS level. The favorites to win the ACC, minus 1,200 to reach the college football playoff. Joe, those are the 5 best prices, and you can see how heavily favored all 5 of these teams are. Miami has the worst number, and it's still minus 1,200.
Yeah, and it's kind of laughable because I think their position in order to not only win the ACC, but to give themselves a pretty good opportunity here at one of those top 4 seeds with a chance to run the table. I mean, this is the first time they've remained undefeated this long. Since what? They started 10-0 a couple of years back. You got to love the spot that Miami's in. But the SEC to me is pure chaos here, Ben, coming up over the next couple of weeks, especially if Georgia loses to Ole Miss in Ole Miss, because that could very well guarantee Georgia not making the SEC championship game, which puts them in a whole different category here. So you've got a lot still to be determined in one of the best conferences in college football. And none of it is easy, Ben, because the tiebreakers are going to mean everything in the SEC moving forward. I can't wait to see pure chaos coming out of that conference.
There is a lot to figure out conference-wise, and part of conference realignment has led to the scraping of divisions, and because of that, potential crazy tiebreaker scenarios that are going to play out and involve computers if necessary. But because Georgia does have the direct head-to-head against Texas and no other team is unbeaten in the SEC in conference play or overall this season, Georgia is the favorite to win the SEC. In fact, Joe, here are the favorites to win the Power 4 conferences. Oregon and Ohio State co-favorites at even money plus 100, but the Ducks have the tiebreaker. Georgia is the favorite to win the SEC, less than $1 in front of Texas. Miami, a very short favorite in minus money to win the ACC. Clemson took a shot this past week, of course, being upended by Louisville. And then when you look around the Big 12, who's that favorite now? One of the 5 remaining undefeated teams in the country in BYU. But there are, Joe, currently, as it stands, 11 teams with a minus money price to reach the college football playoff. That should make things then pretty simple, right? 11 of 12 spots have a minus money playoff price. That should be what it is. If it was only that easy. Let's go to tier number 2, Joe, to look at some of those more minus money prices. Again, Penn State, in the narrative of Saturday in Happy Valley, is not good. But it was not impactful, really, for the Nittany Lions' playoff outlook. They will be a hefty favorite in their final 4 games of the year. There is an argument, I believe a sound one, that Penn State's game in Madison against Wisconsin 2 Saturdays ago, so much more significant for their resume than that of an Ohio State game. Had they won that, they're a shoo-in for the college football playoff. In the strength of schedule or a marquee win for the Nittany Lions is not overwhelming or impressive, and yet Penn State is going to see the college football playoff if they can win out. How about Indiana? The Hoosiers, a perfect 9-0 for the first time in program history, minus 250. 2-touchdown favorite this week against Michigan. Then a bye, a road trip to Ohio State where IU will be the underdog. Will that game even matter if Indiana can win their following one against Purdue? They'll be a heavy favorite for that. But how will the committee judge Indiana based on its strength of schedule so far? Notre Dame also minus 250. The blemish in a bad one against Northern Illinois. But against non-MAC teams, the Irish have looked incredibly dominant. Tennessee minus 230. That huge win over Alabama and a couple of big wins on the resume for the Volunteers. And despite 2 losses, Alabama still minus 140 to reach the college football playoff.
Yeah, you got to love the fact, though, that, Ben, Indiana beats Ohio State. They're facing Oregon in Indy for the Big Ten championship. So they control, it doesn't make a difference, strength of schedule or not. They're going to control their destiny here, and they're going to be a favorite in some pretty easy games coming up. And you mentioned it, Purdue being one of them there. I think Indiana is a great price here across the board, simply because they don't need to worry about somebody else or the committee. Win against Ohio State, and you're facing Oregon with a chance to guarantee yourself one of the top 4 spots. I think it's going to be fantastic down the stretch.
IU a 13.5-point favorite in Bloomington this week against the reigning national champs in Michigan. The last time that Indiana was favored to beat Michigan, 1968. They're laying 13.5 on Saturday. It is just crazy. A huge Saturday once again in the SEC. Texas takes on Florida. The Longhorns 21.5-point favorite. It's going to be tough for the Gators with their third-string quarterback, more than likely, although DJ Lagway, some positive health news yesterday. LSU and Alabama in Death Valley, and a huge one between Georgia and Ole Miss. We'll talk about the G5 next. So as we continue to set the stage for what we might see tonight from the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, Joe, let's look at the group of 5 contenders. Now, I do want to say this and just make it as blatantly clear as I can. There is nothing in the verbiage, the logistics, the protocol that says those 5 automatic berths for the 5 highest-ranked conference champions go to the 4 power conference champions and then a group of 5 team. Theoretically, we could have Army and Boise State earn an automatic berth. It is not just ACC, Big 10, Big 12, SEC, and then throw somebody else a bone. It can be any of the 5 highest-ranked conference champs, and thus it's not just Boise State slotted into that 12th seed if they, in fact, are the 5th highest-ranked conference champ. Because, Joe, based on the odds, at a minus 250 price for the Broncos to reach the college football playoff and a number for Boise State at minus 350 to win the Mountain West, the Broncos have a better price to reach the CFP than that of the Cougars of BYU. So it's not a ranking per se, but if we were to follow the odds, Boise State has a better chance of getting to the college football playoff and thus would be the 4th highest ranked or most likely conference champ in front of BYU and earn that opening round bye. Incredibly important. And based on the odds, Joe, BYU has the 12th best number to reach the college football playoff as of this moment. And even earning that automatic berth, they would not necessarily then be slotted in to a top 4 spot. In fact, based on the odds, BYU would be number 12 in an opening round matchup in Columbus against Ohio State. But let's talk group of 5. You see Boise State, the best number there. Tulane has the 2nd best price, and yet the Green Wave not ranked in the AP top 25 as of this moment. But John Sumrall has done an incredible job in his first year in New Orleans. Army remains undefeated. Army is a perfect 8-0. Army has covered in 6 of their 8 victories, even last week, Joe, with the backup quarterback in Dwayne Coleman filling in for one of the best rushing quarterbacks in the country in Bryson Daly. I cannot wait to see what the committee does with Army's ranking because, again, the strength of schedule is not overwhelmingly impressive, but there is still a chance that Army could be a college football playoff team. Louisiana, who we bet on last Tuesday, they're 7-1 this year. The Raging Cajuns look great, and UNLV still has a shot. More than likely, they are going to earn a berth to the Mountain West title game to get that rematch against Boise State.
Yeah, and listen, I think it's clear that Boise State really kind of controls its own destiny, right, man? And that's really kind of, if I'm Boise State, that's what I want. They already beat UNLV, so that's good there. I just don't see Tulane, Army, and we love Louisiana there because that's an offense and a defense that can actually do some damage. But the reality to me is I don't see Boise State taking its foot off the gas, at least not with the schedule coming up. I just think it's theirs to lose. And I think the order on that board, quite honestly, is exactly spot on here. I don't see Army, Louisiana, or UNLV overtaking Boise State. Tulane's the only other one, I think, out of that 5 that has a shot.
Right. So both the Green Wave and the Black Knights, that's Tulane and Army, play in the American. Tulane is the favorite at -105. Army second best price at +125. The Black Knights have already played 6 AAC conference games so far this year. Tulane, the only blemish to its resume is 2 non-conference losses. Can't fault them against power conference competition. They covered against K-State in the Big Easy. They kept it close against Oklahoma. Ultimately, though, the Sooners did cover that number, winning by 12, I believe it was, as less than a double-digit favorite. So is that going to hurt Tulane even if they win the AAC because their overall resume would not beat out a Boise State in this scenario? Certainly. I will mention this on the other side of the break just because I think it is worth getting to as we get ready for college football. We'll talk some MACtion as well. Joe, based on the odds, I have made what the 12-team college football playoff bracket would look like based on the CFP prices. I will read it off on the other side of the break because it looks awesome. It looks intriguing. And there's a couple of change-ups that I do think are worth noting before we get to the first rankings of the season on this Tuesday night. That's next. Live right here on the early line on SportsGrid. So as promised, what the college football playoff would look like currently in the 12-team era, what that bracket reads based on the CFP prices available on the FanDuel Sportsbook. So, Joe, here are the favorites to win the conferences right now with the highest ranked teams. Miami is an odds-on favorite in the ACC. Oregon and Ohio State co-favorites, but we give the Ducks the benefit of the doubt because they have the tiebreaker head-to-head over the Buckeyes. Georgia the favorite in the SEC, and BYU the favorite now in the Big 12 after a chaotic weekend that saw both Iowa State and Kansas State lose outright against unranked foes. And Boise State is the overwhelming favorite in the Mountain West and has a -250 price to reach the college football playoff, -350 to win the conference crown. And Joe, because Boise State at -250 has a better price currently than BYU to reach the college football playoff on the FanDuel Sportsbook, the Cougs +105. I said the Broncos -250. Boise State has a more likely path to the CFP, thus based on the odds, one of those 4 opening round buys. It would go Oregon 1, Georgia 2, Miami 3, Boise State 4. So now we go to the at-larges. And again, we use the playoff price. The more likely odds, the better number. The higher we are ranking you based on those odds. Ohio State at -3,500 would be the 5 seed. They would host BYU, who has the 12th best price to reach the college football playoff right now on FanDuel at plus 105, the shortest number of a Big 12 team, the shortest price that is not minus money. The 5-12 matchup would be Ohio State in Columbus taking on BYU. Texas would be the 6th seed. They would host Alabama. Penn State would be the 7th seed. They would host 10th-ranked Tennessee. And how about this matchup in the 8-9? An all-Indiana affair in Bloomington. Indiana and Notre Dame, both the Hoosiers and the Irish at minus 250. Again, Indiana would be the 8th seed. Notre Dame would be the 9. To me, that is beautiful and would show the parity that we have all desired in the 12-team college football playoff in the expanded CFP. Again, I'll probably share that out on social media so you can see the numbers and not just hear me say them. But it's awesome, and I hope the committee does follow suit and not makes us so angry tonight based on these initial rankings.
And I do think a lot is going to change over the first couple of weeks, Ben. It's inevitable now that you've got a 12-team playoff. But I'll say this. When the committee, ever since they implemented the 14 playoff, when they list the top 5 teams, right, the top 5 or 6 teams, after the first ranking, Ben, those teams went 10-0 straight up and 8-2 against the number in the first game after the release. So those top teams in the 14 playoff era delivered in week 1 after the release straight up, winning across the board and just not covering in 2. So I would expect whatever this comes out to be here tonight, expect those top 5 teams, Ben, to rattle off some wins coming up this week.
Which is going to be huge because we've got Georgia, Ole Miss on Saturday. Yep. We've got Texas, Florida on Saturday. We've got LSU and Alabama. Probably not either of them going to be in the top 5, but that's a virtual elimination game in terms of CFP contention. It is going to be incredible. Oof. And not just the college football playoff rankings, but come on, man. This is what we care about on this Tuesday. Potentially the most important thing, I kid. But midweek MACtion returns to our lives. Joe, you've got some great trends to highlight. Central Michigan, 13.5-point home underdog are the Chips against Bowling Green. In fact, both of these spreads are double digits. Miami of Ohio laying 12 and a hook against Ball State. The Red Hawks and Chuck Martin got off to a slow start this year in tough non-conference action, have figured it out in conference play. They're laying 12.5 on the road against Ball State tonight.
Yeah, and the trends for MACtion weekday football, guys, is absolutely out of control. Over the last decade, MAC teams who are double-digit favorites during the week, 65-9 straight up, 45-29 against the number. Last year, Ben, alone, they went 6-0 straight up and 5-1 against the number. What does that mean? If you're a double-digit favorite during the week in MACtion, don't be scared of the number. It's worth playing at the very least.
So when you look at Miami of Ohio, again, they are 3-1 in conference play. They lost their opener to the conference favorites, Toledo, but they have gone over in all 4 games. Normally a really good defense and still is pretty good, but they've been scoring points. They've scored 30-plus in their last 3. They have covered the number in all 3 as the favored side. They just blew out Central Michigan to end out October 46-7. Meanwhile, Bowling Green, the other double-digit favorite tonight, as they take on the Chips of Central Michigan, they have not been as good in terms of covering numbers in MAC play. They are just 3-1, and they in fact lost outright as a favorite against NIU. It's because Thomas Hammock and his Northern Illinois team, when they're an underdog, they just cover numbers. They are only 1-2 against the spread, that being Bowling Green as the favorite in MAC play this year. All 3 of those games under as well. Joe, so many numbers to like. I would probably lay the number with Miami of Ohio against Ball State, albeit in midweek MACtion where things get crazy on the road. If not, maybe the under. I'd probably lean under between the Chips and the Falcons of Bowling Green.
Look at the weather report here tonight in this Ball State, Miami of Ohio. Rain and wind gusts up to 30 miles per hour. So that is exactly why we're starting to see that total come down here a little bit this morning in the marketplace. But either way, Miami of Ohio is the better defense, the better running team. I don't know that anybody's going to be able to throw the ball in 30-mile-per-hour gusts, but at that point, it just feels like this could be a runaway for Miami of Ohio for sure.
Yeah, maybe then we lean under team total for Ball State in this matchup.